Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, just talking about books. I just wanted to create a channel to talk about the books I'm reading. Reading has been such a huge part of my life the last few years. So I've been doing a lot of different reading challenges, goals, I don't know what to call them. One of them is reading all of Cormac McCarthy's books in publication order. So last month I read Suttree, and then Blood Meridian comes right after that. So, man, I loved both of those books a lot. I did a little bit of research and watched a lot of videos about McCarthy. One of the things I read was that his favorite book was Moby Dick. And this book inspired him to write Blood Meridian. And I can see a little bit of that in there. I had never read Moby Dick, so I thought, man, let's give it a shot. It's an intimidating book. It's like 500 pages, but it feels like it's 1,000 pages because it's just very dense. It's 492 pages, but the text, I mean, is so small. I can normally read like 50 pages an hour. I don't know. I haven't really like timed it, but this was more like 5 or 10 pages an hour. I'm serious. It took me that long to read this. I was looking at my Goodreads and it was like January 14th, pretty much the halfway point, and all I had read was Moby Dick. It took me forever. I started this in December actually, so it took me a long time to read this. But I'm glad I read it. It was really, really beautiful. The beginning was great. I'd say the first 25%, I was like, man, this is going to be super easy to read. This is really, really interesting. I'm following along. It's beautiful writing, a really interesting story. But then they get to the sea. So Ishmael gets to sea, and there's so much talk about whales, about their anatomy and their habits and the different species of whale and just the small details of whaling and everything. It's a lot. So there's a lot of sort of slow, boring sections, but all the sections with Ishmael and Queequeg and Captain Ahab and all the characters were really good. And the ending was really good as well. And I could see why this one is considered like one of the best novels of all time. And I'll probably reread it again when I'm much older. Maybe I'll appreciate it more, but it was tough to get through. I would say I didn't necessarily want to pick it up and read it. I wasn't excited to pick it back up and read it. And that's always a sign to me of how much I'm enjoying a book, is if I want to pick it up and read it, if I want to stop reading it when it's time to do something else. So I really like the channel Better Than Food book reviews. I love that guy's channel. And his favorite book of last year was Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. So I've got this novel and a short story collection. I actually already had them. I'm like, I gotta push everything away and just read this now. And I'm glad I did. It was really, really weird. I'm from the South. I love Southern authors. I love their weird literature. And this was definitely one of the weirdest books I've read. It's about a preacher, kind of. I mean, I won't give any spoilers for any of these books, but the cover, you could see it's a person wearing glasses, sunglasses, dark glasses, almost as if he was blind. This is really weird. It was basically about a preacher who blinds himself. You've heard that before, right? It's where someone blinds themselves for their faith. There's so many things I could get into about this book, but I won't try to go too long because I did actually end up reading quite a bit this month. I really enjoyed this. I gave Moby Dick 4 stars. I couldn't give it 5 stars just because I personally didn't love it like I wanted to. Again, I'll probably read that when I'm older, and maybe I'll appreciate it a bit more when I'm more well-read and am a different person. But this one, I gave 4 stars as well. This one I would love to reread also. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I didn't pick up on. I'm trying to read these books slowly and not just blaze through them. Like if I'm reading Stephen King or something, I will just burn through those books so fast because there's no really challenge. You're just kind of reading the plot. But a book like this, I really tried to go slow and pick up on all the little things. And yeah, it was good. If you're into weird Southern fiction, if you're into religious themes, then man, I guess this was a kind of a religious heavy month because Moby Dick is sort of like a religious metaphor as well. But one of the other things that I'm doing is I'm trying to read books that I read in school, you know, that you have to read in high school. Maybe I don't really remember them. So a few months ago, I read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I really enjoyed it. I hadn't read it since I was a kid. Got a lot of pleasure out of that. I read that book out loud to my baby. He's 2. So, I mean, he don't know what's going on, but it was fun to read it to him, you know, out loud. But the next one on the list, I did not read this one out loud to him. It was Lord of the Flies. I probably read this when I was a kid, but I didn't really remember. So, yeah, this was just a nice, quick, after reading Moby Dick, I was able to burn through this pretty quickly. And this is more of a, you know, it's not a challenging read. It's for high schoolers, really. But I can appreciate it. And yeah, I didn't remember why this book was called The Lord of the Flies. And now I remember. And I'll just go ahead and tell you because I think it's interesting. There's really no spoilers in anything I talk about. But it's called Lord of the Flies because one of the kids kind of hallucinates. They kill a pig and they put the pig's head on a stake. And one of the children that are trapped on this island kind of hallucinates that the pig talks to him. And he calls himself the Lord of the Flies. And I thought that was just crazy. I thought that was really good. If you've never heard of this or anything, it's about like elementary school kids that are shipwrecked on an island without any adult supervision. So it's all these kids that are trying to survive by themselves. It was really good. It was really brutal. There's murder. There's a lot of crazy things that happen. I mean, I guess that's a spoiler. Sorry, but everyone kind of knows that. I think this is from like the 20s or something. Oh, 1954 is what it says. I was way off. Anyway, really enjoyed it. So, I do read a lot of book. I read like fantasy, horror, sci-fi, classics. But for some reason this month, I was just feeling it, man. I was just feeling older, classic literature, something that was a little more challenging. I read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi last year, so maybe I was just looking to sort of up my game a little bit. But the next one on the list, I had never read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I was freaking blown away by this book. This was not a tough read for me. This was beautiful. I tried to slow down and really enjoy this one, but I just blew through it. Man, I read this in just a few days. I couldn't put it down. It was so good. And I mean, the only challenging part about reading this is just all the Russian names. But once you get to a certain point, I knew who all the characters were. I knew all of them. Of course, you've got Pavir and Volovkonsky. I think they also do the translation for the brothers Karamazov, which I definitely am going to read soon. I've heard that's his best book. I don't know for sure. But man, I really enjoyed this. This is about a man who commits a murder, a crime. And he has a theory that great men in this world can be excused for their crimes because of their greatness. Like Napoleon, you know, like a great man goes to war and kills a bunch of people and he can be excused from those crimes because he is a great man. Very interesting. It's the punishment is more him internally, his own punishment for what he did. And oh, this was beautiful. This was awesome. There's a quote in here, something like, one of the characters is talking to Raskolnikov, our main character. I think it might be Razumikin. He says, great men, intelligent men, like the smartest men in the world, tend to have a deep sadness about them. And he says he doesn't think there can be a highly intelligent man that isn't deeply sad. And I thought that was beautiful. It's like the more intelligent you are, the more you understand, the worse you are. It's almost that saying, ignorance is bliss. It's like that opposed, you know. Beautiful book. So glad I finally read it. If you're intimidated by it at all, don't be. This was a breeze, man. I just blew through this thing. It wasn't like Moby Dick. But then I picked something up that was a little bit newer, but still pretty old. This is actually from the year 1987, which is the year I was born. So now you guys know how old I am. But it was Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood. This is my first Murakami book. I picked this one just because this was one of his most popular ones. I later realized that this is much different than what he's known for. This isn't like magical realism at all. This is like a nostalgic love story in a way. But, oh, by the way, I gave Crime and Punishment 5 stars. This one I also gave 5 stars. This was probably my favorite book I read all month. Something about it, man. It was so fun to read. It was so beautiful. I don't read books like this normally, and I feel like I may have been doing myself a disservice because this was really special. I've thought about this book a lot since I read it. It's basically just about a young man and his first love. It deals with a lot of mental illness. It's got a lot of sexual content. None of it's like gross. It's all pretty tame and well written, and I was a little put off by all the sex and the way he writes women, but I just tried to imagine I'm a young guy, and you know, maybe that's just the way I'm thinking at the time. I don't know. I was able to put that aside and just enjoy the beautiful writing, and it just made me feel cozy. It made me feel like, I mean, everyone knows when you had that first love, you know. It made me want to be a better husband. It made me think about mental illness, and there's a lot of suicide in the book, and I know people that have committed suicide, and of course that's one of the saddest things you can ever discuss, but I think we should discuss it. It's important. And you never really know why someone would do that to themselves. You know, you can guess, but you never really know. And of course you can't ask them because they're gone. And sometimes you see it coming and sometimes you don't. And man, I could talk about this book for a while. It's beautiful. We're getting on. I got one more book here, and it's actually because of Norwegian Wood. So in this book, he talks about several other books. And he says that his favorite book was The Great Gatsby. So I thought, hey, this was actually on my high school, you know, reading list. I remember reading this in high school, and it's been so long I didn't really remember. So I did pick up another copy and read this, and I enjoyed it. I'm glad it was so short. It was, I mean, it was a little bit boring. I'm not really that into like the 1920s. I think this is why I said 20s earlier when I was talking about Lord of the Flies, because this is actually from the 20s, and this takes place in the 1920s, in that sort of rich bougie era. and that's not really my thing I'm excited to read. But I did appreciate the character of Gatsby and how he was just determined to get Daisy back. He was just trying to get back the woman he loved, and it's interesting. Like, it's almost like he didn't really even want her back at some point. It was just the idea in his head of her, of that younger version of her. And of course, I won't spoil anything, but the ending really took a 180 that I didn't remember. There's just the fate of Gatsby. I totally forgot about that, and it was actually the most interesting part of the whole book to me. And it was beautifully written. So glad I read it. It wasn't my favorite book of the month. I think I gave this one 3 stars. I can appreciate why this is beloved, but is this someone's favorite book? I mean, I don't really know why it would be. If it's your favorite book, please let me know. I'd love to hear someone smarter than me talk about it. But yeah, man, that's what I read this month. So sorry my lighting sucks. There they are right there. I'll do all my graphic novels separately. But yeah, not a bad month considering halfway through I'd only read Moby Dick. And then I was able to just burn through these in just a few weeks. So, hey man, thank you guys for watching. See ya.